They don't need to shout to control you. They just need to make you doubt yourself. Notice the silence used as punishment, the praise that disappears the moment you assert a boundary. Pay attention to how accountability feels like an attack to them, but criticism is freely handed to you. This is not confusion, and it's not love. It's a pattern meant to keep you shrinking while they stay powerful. Awareness is the moment your strength quietly returns. They twist reality in subtle, calculated ways that leave you second-guessing your own mind. It rarely starts with something obvious or dramatic. It begins with small contradictions, gentle corrections, and confident statements that directly oppose what you clearly remember. You recall a conversation one way, they insist it never happened. You express how something hurt you, they tell you you're being too sensitive or that you misunderstood their intention. Over time, these moments stack on top of each other until your inner voice grows quieter and their version of events becomes louder. This distortion is not accidental. It serves a purpose: control. When someone can make you doubt your perception, they don't need to dominate you openly. You start doing the work for them. You hesitate before speaking, wondering if you're wrong. You apologize even when you haven't done anything. You seek reassurance for feelings that once felt valid without permission. Your confidence erodes not because you are weak, but because you are being trained to distrust yourself. They present themselves as the authority on truth. Their tone is calm, certain, sometimes even caring, which makes the manipulation harder to detect. They may say things like, "I'm just being honest," or "I remember it clearly," even when the evidence contradicts them. When you bring proof, the goalposts move. When you stay firm, the conversation becomes about your attitude instead of the issue. Slowly, the focus shifts away from facts and toward your supposed flaws. What makes this especially damaging is how it isolates you internally. You stop reaching out for clarity because explaining feels exhausting. You replay conversations in your head, searching for mistakes that aren't there. You wonder why things feel off but can't name it, because every attempt to define the problem is met with denial. The confusion keeps you stuck, hoping that if you just understand better, things will improve. This pattern trains you to abandon your own memory in favor of theirs. You may even start defending them to others, convinced you are the one who gets things wrong. That is the moment the power imbalance becomes complete, not because they are stronger, but because your trust in yourself has been systematically weakened. Reclaiming that trust begins with recognizing that consistent confusion is not a flaw in you, but a sign that someone has been rewriting your reality. When you try to set a boundary, the reaction tells you everything. It's not met with curiosity or respect, but with discomfort, irritation, or subtle punishment. A simple request becomes an argument. A clear limit is treated like a personal attack. You're made to feel selfish for needing space, rest, or basic consideration, as if your boundaries exist only to inconvenience them. Over time, this teaches you that protecting yourself comes at a cost you're expected to pay. They may ignore the boundary altogether, acting as if it was never stated. You repeat yourself, calmly at first, then with growing frustration, only to be met with excuses or jokes that minimize what you asked for. Sometimes the boundary is acknowledged verbally but violated in action, which creates a confusing loop where words say one thing and behavior proves another. You start questioning whether you explained it clearly enough, even though clarity was never the problem. In other moments, boundaries are met with emotional consequences. Silence replaces communication. Warmth turns cold. Affection is withdrawn without explanation. This unspoken punishment pressures you to backtrack, not because the boundary was unreasonable, but because the emotional environment becomes unbearable. You learn that compliance brings peace and self-respect brings tension, that conditioning slowly reshapes your choices. They may also flip the narrative, accusing you of being controlling, dramatic, or ungrateful for asking for something so basic. Your boundary becomes evidence of your flaws rather than a reflection of your needs. This reversal is powerful because it shifts responsibility away from them and places it squarely on you. Instead of discussing the behavior that crossed the line, you're now defending your right to have a line at all. Over time, you begin to shrink your needs preemptively. You don't ask, you don't clarify. You tolerate discomfort because it feels easier than the emotional backlash. Boundaries become something you only practice in your head, not out loud. The absence of open conflict may look like harmony, but it's actually self-erasure disguised as peace. What makes this dynamic especially damaging is that healthy relationships depend on boundaries to function. They create safety, trust, and mutual respect. When someone repeatedly dismisses or punishes them, they are not just crossing a line, they are communicating that your inner world is less important than their comfort. Recognizing this pattern is not about becoming rigid or defensive, but about understanding that anyone who requires you to abandon yourself in order to stay connected is asking for a price no relationship should ever demand. Accountability feels threatening to them because it disrupts the image they work so hard to protect. When a concern is raised, even gently, the response is rarely reflection. Instead, the energy shifts. The conversation suddenly becomes about their feelings, their stress, their past, or how unfairly they are being treated. What began as a specific issue dissolves into emotional chaos, leaving the original concern unresolved and you feeling guilty for bringing it up at all. Blame is subtly redirected. They might acknowledge a small detail while avoiding the real issue or offer an apology that sounds sincere but changes nothing. "I'm sorry you feel that way" replaces genuine responsibility. This keeps the appearance of maturity while ensuring no real change is required. Over time, you learn that confronting behavior leads nowhere except exhaustion, so you stop trying. Denial often follows when deflection doesn't work. They insist events didn't happen the way you remember, or that their intentions matter more than the impact. If proof is presented, the focus shifts again, this time to your tone, timing, or emotional response. The problem is no longer what they did, but how you dared to address it. Accountability is reframed as cruelty, and honesty is labeled as an attack. Victimhood becomes the final shield. They recall sacrifices they've made, hardships they've endured, or times they felt unappreciated. These stories may be real, but they are strategically deployed to derail the conversation. You're pulled into comforting them, reassuring them, and minimizing your own pain to restore emotional balance. The original issue disappears beneath their need to be seen as wronged rather than responsible. This pattern creates a power imbalance where mistakes are one-sided. You become hyper-aware of your flaws while theirs remain untouchable. You over-explain, soften your words, and choose silence more often than honesty. Accountability turns into a dangerous act, not because it's unfair, but because it threatens the fragile structure they depend on. In healthy dynamics, accountability deepens trust. It allows repair and growth. In this dynamic, it's treated as betrayal. The refusal to take responsibility is not about misunderstanding, it's about preservation of control. Recognizing this helps you see that the endless cycle of blame, denial, and victimhood is not a communication problem to be solved, but a pattern designed to keep you carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be yours. Affection in this dynamic is a currency, carefully measured and distributed to maintain control rather than to express genuine connection. It is given when you comply, when you meet their unspoken expectations, or when your behavior reflects positively on them. Praise is abundant when you perform in ways that make them look good, or when you reinforce their sense of superiority. But the moment you assert independence, express discomfort, or step outside the roles they've assigned, warmth vanishes. Smiles are replaced with coldness, attention with indifference, and words of encouragement with silence or subtle criticism. You quickly learn that approval is conditional, and that love or kindness is never freely offered. It is always tied to your utility or obedience. This conditional affection creates a constant state of anxiety and anticipation. You start measuring your actions, second-guessing every decision, and wondering what will earn their approval next. Every interaction becomes a test. Every compliment or gesture a reward you must earn and maintain. The unpredictability intensifies the effect. When they are warm, it feels like a gift or an achievement, reinforcing your desire to please. When they withdraw, it feels like punishment, leaving you scrambling to understand what went wrong. This cycle of reward and withdrawal creates dependency as you begin to crave the rare moments of validation while fearing the inevitable absence that follows. The conditional nature of their affection also undermines your self-worth. Over time, you start to believe that your natural feelings, desires, and needs are insufficient because genuine connection only arrives when you mold yourself to their standards. You may suppress parts of yourself, apologize for your existence, or hide authentic thoughts to maintain the appearance of harmony. Emotional labor becomes one-sided. You give freely and strategically, while they offer connection only when it serves them. Your identity becomes intertwined with their approval, and the subtle message you internalize is that your value is not inherent but earned through compliance. This dynamic also weaponizes intimacy. Personal disclosures, vulnerability, and expressions of trust are often used against you later or withheld to maintain power. Affection is used strategically to manipulate, to confuse, or to reward behavior that aligns with their needs. You begin to question whether their kindness is real or merely a tool, and this skepticism erodes your ability to relax, to trust, and to feel safe in the relationship. The constant evaluation of their mood becomes a full-time mental effort, and even when everything appears calm, tension simmers beneath the surface because the stakes of misalignment are clear. Understanding this pattern is liberating. Recognizing that affection is conditional and that your worth is not determined by someone else's approval is the first step in reclaiming emotional autonomy. No one has the right to make love, warmth, or connection contingent upon obedience or performance. Awareness allows you to step back, observe the cycle, and begin choosing relationships in which affection is genuine, freely given, and mutual, rather than a tool of control. Recognizing these patterns is not about labeling people harshly, but about reclaiming your clarity, your boundaries, and your self-worth. When someone consistently twists reality, dismisses your boundaries, avoids accountability, or makes affection conditional, it is a signal that the dynamic is unhealthy and manipulative. Your clarity is the first step toward lasting strength and freedom.